With Inauguration Day fast approaching, many are now looking toward Biden's future policies, particularly regarding China. The Trump administration took a hardline stance toward Beijing. Will Biden follow suit? NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more on those questions.
President-elect Joe Biden named China one of the defining challenges of our time. But filling out his State Department with Obama administration veterans may indicate a desire to go back to foreign policy route laid out by the former president. After the election, the Chinese regime State Council hosted an online event. There, Biden's pick for Indo-Pacific coordinator Kurt Campbell said the new administration will improve its dialogue with China, including strategic and economic dialogue. The newly created role is often likened to an Asia Tsar and meant to reflect the growing importance of U.S.-China relations. He also called for what he said stable competition between the U.S. and China, saying the two can cooperate on climate change and controlling the pandemic. Campbell advised China to deepen and expand its engagement with the U.S. That's according to his speech transcript published by Chinese media. He said people in the financial sector have contributed to U.S.-China relations, and that China should expand its engagement with different U.S. interest groups, build a new circle of friends, and maintain relationships with old friends. In an article he co-authored, Campbell argued the U.S. needs to make a conscious effort to deter China's aggression. The article pushed for what it called a better solution, persuading China that there are benefits to remaining peaceful. The article also said that Washington should, quote, provide Beijing with incentives to engage productively and then collectively design penalties if China decides to take steps that threaten the larger order. Now we turn to a lab in Wuhan. New findings surrounding the Wuhan lab have emerged. The facility has remained at the center of controversy for months. That's as some suspect it leaked the CCP virus. The lab is called the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The U.S. government says there is reason to believe several of the lab's researchers became sick in the fall of 2019, and they showed symptoms similar to those of the CCP virus. The information came before the first confirmed virus case in China. A senior researcher from the lab previously claimed no staff members showed signs of virus infection. The State Department also says the lab has been experimenting on a coronavirus native to bats since 2016. Adding that the bat virus is over 96% similar to the CCP virus, the closest sample so far. The Wuhan lab has remained secretive about its work on the bat virus. It also removed information about the related studies online. On the surface, the lab appears to be a civil organization, but the U.S. found it worked with China's military on secret projects. The U.S. State Department says the lab has been working on classified research for the Chinese military since 2017. This includes animal experiments. The findings come as a team of health experts arrived in China last week. They were sent by the World Health Organization and are in China to investigate the origins of the virus. The U.S. says the experts must get their hands on several key aspects. One, getting access to the lab's work on the bat virus. Second, an account of why the lab removed their bat virus studies online. And finally, interviews with those researchers who fell ill. Beijing has been blocking experts from investigating the virus origin in China for months. The WHO sent experts to China last February, but authorities didn't allow them to visit Wuhan. Later, a small team was able to visit the city, but officials still blocked them from areas suspected of being virus origin points. The latest trip hasn't gone smoothly either. After two WHO experts left for China, they learned that Chinese officials hadn't approved their visas. This despite China having agreed to their visit. China later approved their entry, but some are concerned that experts' visits could be heavily controlled.
Possible new evidence reveals that Canada may have covered up the pandemic even before the first case was officially announced in China. NTD's Don Ma has more on the story.
A leaked document shows that Canada may have assisted the Chinese Communist Party in covering up the pandemic back in its early critical stages. Canadian officials potentially withheld information that could have prevented the outbreak. The report comes on the heels of a military document obtained by Canadian news outlet Rebel News. It says the Canadian government likely knew about the existence of the CCP virus as early as October 2019. That's months before China started reporting virus cases and weeks before the first ever confirmed virus patient. This information would contradict the Chinese regime's narrative about the pandemic's timeline. However, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau chose not to publicly release the information. The document is written by the advisor to Trudeau's National Defense Minister, dated January 2020. It's titled Exposure to Coronavirus During the Wuhan Military Games. It revolves around virus concerns regarding Canadian soldiers who traveled to China's Wuhan city last year. The soldiers went there to participate in a sporting event. A senior Canadian Armed Forces soldier who has inside knowledge on the matter told Rebel News that dozens and dozens of Canadian soldiers became sick from participating in the event. They all showed severe virus symptoms like coughing, lung problems, diarrhea, and vomiting. This happened in October 2019, well before China reported its first virus cases. The senior soldier says that the Canadian government allegedly refused to perform virus testing on the soldiers after they returned from Wuhan. Rebel News reports that this is because the Canadian government didn't want to provoke the Chinese Communist Party. If the test results came back positive, it would prove that the CCP lied about when the virus emerged in China and about the severity of its human-to-human transmission rate. A similar report by the New York Post explains that French soldiers were also sickened after participating in the event. It's unclear why Trudeau's government did not release this information, but we have seen the CCP's retaliatory response when countries probe into the virus's origins. Australia, among other countries, has repeatedly called for an investigation into the origins of the virus. But in a move widely perceived as retaliation, Beijing slapped strong sanctions on imports from the country. The CCP also has a record of retaliating against Canada. After Canadian authorities arrested the CFO of Chinese telecom giant Huawei, Chinese authorities arrested Canadian citizens Michael Korvig and Michael Spavor. Don Ma reporting, NTD News.
Secretary Pompeo is giving an overview of foreign policy achievements. He highlights how the Trump administration stood up to the Chinese Communist Party.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo highlighted the achievements of the Trump administration in cracking down the threat of the Chinese Communist Party in a series of tweets posted over the weekend. He said the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is the central threat of our time. That, quote, for 50 years, America bent its knee to China. Under the Trump administration, no more. Secretary Pompeo says this administration combated the CCP's influence operations in America. This includes closing nearly half of all CCP-funded Confucius Institutes on U.S. college campuses, closing a Chinese consulate in Houston for conducting espionage, requiring think tanks to disclose foreign fundings, labeling 15 CCP media organizations as foreign missions, and prosecuting CCP spies for stealing American technology and intellectual property. In areas of trade and commerce, the Trump administration punished the CCP's unfair trade practices by imposing sanctions on Chinese goods. It added CCP-linked firms to the Department of Commerce's entity list. It excluded telecom giants Huawei and ZTE from 5G networks over their ties to the regime, and blocked U.S. government retirement accounts from investing in the regime's military. The Trump administration's actions did not only protect Americans, it also punished the CCP for its human rights abuses in China. It has done so by imposing sanctions and visa restrictions on human rights abusers, blocking imports made with forced labor, and revoking Hong Kong's special trade status when the CCP eroded its autonomy. Although the Trump administration believes in putting America first, it has never been unilateral in dealing with the CCP. It built coalitions with like-minded countries to counter the threat of the CCP on a global scale. This includes strengthening the Quad alliance with Japan, Australia, and India, engaging with Taiwan's officials, exposing the CCP's hostilities to other free countries, denying the CCP's claims in the South China Sea, and holding the regime responsible for covering up the virus pandemic. Secretary Pompeo says that through these actions, quote, the Trump administration ended decades of appeasement and misguided engagement policy towards the Chinese Communist Party. He believes these actions have exposed the threat of the CCP to the American people and to the world.
A law professor who represented President Trump in a case challenging the election is forced out of his job. What's more, John Eastman spoke at the January 6th Stop the Steal rally. The two events led the university to accuse him of playing a role in the chaos at the Capitol. He's now jobless. NTD's Melina Weiskup has that story.
Just days after speaking alongside President Trump at the Washington, D.C. Stop the Steal rally, law professor John Eastman was forced to leave his job at California's Chapman University. Eastman and the university reached a settlement where he agreed to retire and will not sue the faculty for defamation.
Well, what really triggered this was the fact that I represented the President of the United States before the Supreme Court. The hostile reaction from the faculty began then. Can you imagine if the President had been Obama? They'd be throwing festivals for me. So the double standard here is really preposterous.
169 faculty members signed an open letter to the university demanding Eastman be fired. And the university president accused Eastman of, quote, playing a role in the tragic events in Washington, D.C. that jeopardized our democracy. Many have attempted to pin blame on President Trump for the Capitol chaos and to lump in everyone who participated in the Stop the Steal rally, despite no evidence that they incited these actions.
While that speech and while the president's speech was going on, 2 miles away at the Capitol, a group of 100 or so thugs, made an intrusion on the Capitol. It's really preposterous to think that what we were in the process of saying 2 miles away is what triggered those folks down there.
Eastman denounced the Capitol building violence and says a greater issue posed now is an attack on free speech. He says that if citizens feel they can't speak up when they sense that something illegal has taken place, that's a step away from the free society which America is meant to be. But Eastman says he will continue to pursue the truth. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Hi, we're happy to announce that you can also catch us on cable TV now. Millions of households already choose us as one of their trusted news sources, and you can too. You can watch us in Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and many other cities as well. And if your system doesn't carry NTD yet, you can just give them a quick call and request NTD on your cable provider. Thank you for watching. See you next time.